Hi friends, welcome to the channel. Hit the like and subscribe, and don't forget to comment with an emoji just for the sake of engagement.
Chapter 1. The story starts when the female lead met her boyfriend, Pedro, at a cafe and asked him to break up with her. He was confused since it was so abrupt and unexpected. He asked her why she was breaking up at a bakery, especially when he was treating her for the first time. He wanted to know the reason why she wanted to end their relationship. Pedro was a very neat and handsome guy, and compared to him, she felt like a total mess. She never had money to dress up because she spent most of that money dressing up Pedro, and felt burdened in the process. She got up from her seat because she didn't feel like explaining herself, simply asking him to break up with her. Pedro thought she was simply trying to make him jealous as a strategy, so she decided to let him know the reasons. He cheated way too much, from Lisa, her academy classmate, to Meryl, her junior at work. He didn't even leave her younger sister, Soldika. Pedro, annoyed by her rudeness, replied that sometimes he needed to look elsewhere since she had not been treating him well. Our girl was smart. She had a recording device with her and got the evidence of him cheating. She told him how arrogant he was, as he was just a third circle mage who acted like an archmage. Pedro fought back, saying she was just a first circle mage and had no right to belittle him. But she was not done. She told him he was a master at extorting money, and even bedbugs would have sucked less than he did. She continued pointing out his flaws, one by one, and by the end she came up with 500 reasons to break up. The onlookers were horrified, and some even laughed while he was breathless. He begged her to stop pointing out the flaws. Once she was done with the list, she decided to leave. Pedro told her that she was being ridiculous and asked why she was going berserk. He asked her why she was behaving like someone who had died and come back to life. Upon hearing him, she suddenly stopped and asked if he would believe her. If she said that she really did, the truth was that she really did come back to life the day before. She was always just a stupid pushover who helped her family whenever they were in need and often got insulted for her looks and weight. Her own mother even pestered her not to break up with Pedro since no one would take her, using her for their living expenses. She was so overworked that one day her chest felt tight, and she collapsed from emotional distress, dying of heart failure. At that very moment, the memories of her past life came flooding to her. She remembered that before she was reincarnated as Ishul, she was a proud workaholic named Yoon Se-jin from South Korea. She was extremely good at her job and excelled at all her skills. Most importantly, she was someone who knew how to speak up against injustice and was the complete opposite of Ishul. After she came back to life for the third time and Pedro wanted to meet her for money, she secretly rejoiced. This time she was more courageous and had all the memories of her past life. So she decided to break up with her trash of a boyfriend to celebrate being reborn. She decided to leave the cafe and not deal with him any longer. But the waiter called her and gave her a rock-hard bread filled with hot cream and the spiciest sauce as complimentary food and told her that it was perfect for pouring over someone. Ishul was confused for a moment but soon realized her intentions. She grabbed the plate and headed toward Pedro. She asked Pedro if he really didn't want to break up with her. When he replied that he didn't and was even thinking of marrying her, she threw the hot sauce all over his face. Pedro fell to the ground crying in pain. Ishul told him that she was tired of him and his extortion. She told him that she was dumping him. Pedro, furious and hurt, told her that her parents had been begging him to marry her for so long, trying to intimidate her. She took the hot bread and told him that she was planning to leave her family too and threw the hot bread at him, completely knocking him off. The waitress cheered her, giving her a full score for the throw. Although Ishul wanted to throw water and even slap him, he was already out. Ishul finally left the cafe towards her happy new life. Chapter 2. After breaking up with her boyfriend, she knew that the next step was to part ways with her family. Even though she wouldn't be able to get her own place right away, getting out of her house was possible because the Imperial Palace employees could use the official residence within the palace for free. The residences were a bit old, but it wasn't bad to live in them, and she was really looking forward to it. But when she reached the residences, she saw a notice stating that the reconstruction of the building would start in 3 days. She remembered that in her past life the residence also got a flashy makeover, and she found herself in deep trouble. She began wondering what she should do because at that rate she would have to look for a place to rent, but she also noticed a note saying that the administrators who were currently employed at the palace may reside there for the next 3 days. She was hopeful that by that time she would be able to find a place, but when she reached her work, to her dismay she remembered that her family had taken all her salary just a few days ago. Ishil was determined to make it work since she was the one who came back from the dead. One of her colleagues asked her if she had heard that Fiona was getting married soon. Asking her if she got an invitation, when she replied that she didn't, he was hopeful that she would get it soon, but he was also worried because Fiona didn't have a place to live. Ishil was sure that Fiona had a plan, since in her past life she also managed to secure a place of her own by using the newlyweds special provision policy, which was introduced by the palace. Created solely for newly married couples, this policy granted eligibility to move into the newlywed housing complex if selected. It was a newly built set of buildings that was elegant and very close to the imperial palace. It was a dream townhouse complex that rented out all the furniture. But due to the failed marketing, only a few people knew about the program. So she knew that if anyone applied, they were guaranteed to get in. Ishil knew that if she were also a newlywed, she could have also applied right away. And it would have been easier for her to cut ties with her family, but since she broke up with her boyfriend, she didn't stand a chance. Her colleagues suddenly remembered that Fiona gave him a flyer about the same special provision. When she saw the flyer, she noted that applicants could still get in, but they must register their marriage by June 8th, which was coincidentally the same date she had to leave the residence. After getting ready, they decided to head out for the inspections. Her colleague told Ishil that she was lucky because the knight doing the weapons inspection with them was Sir Dylan. When he didn't get a reaction out of her, he asked her why she was so indifferent. Sir Dylan was popular and was liked by every woman, and he was also his idol. Ishil gave it a thought and remembered that Sir Dylan was a knight of commoner origin. He was an elite knight in the Emperor's knightly order and had won the sportsman tournament held once a year by the Emperor himself. As he started to praise Sir Dylan and fawn over his black hair that was like a slice of the night and his crimson red eyes, he stated that he was insanely handsome. But he did have a flaw. He was expressionless. Usually, he was busy suppressing terrorism and achieving great merits on the battlefield. So Ishil didn't know why such an amazing person would want to do household maintenance and came to the conclusion that he must like such work. As they were working in the warehouse, Ishil was surprised by Dylan's look and work ethic. He was unbelievably precise with the speed at which he removed rust, but there was also not a hair's breadth of error in how he rearranged the maintained sword. Her colleague whispered that he had heard she got into a fight with her boyfriend at the bakery. Helena from the next team saw it and passed the details. He called the guy a weirdo and asked her to break up with him as soon as possible. But before she could say that they had already broken up, he asked her if she was planning to marry him since she took the newlyweds town flyer. Upon overhearing their conversation, Sir Dylan lost his cool and damaged one of the swords with his sheer force. When Ishil asked him if he was having any problems, Dylan, without even looking at her, replied that it was a mistake, but the metal cracked under his force, and the sword broke, shocking Ishil. Suddenly, she heard Sir Dylan talking about marriage, and she heard him tell her not to marry her boyfriend, leaving her confused. Chapter 3. Ishil and her friend were surprised to hear him speak. She wondered if they also knew that her ex was trash and realized that word had already gotten out around town that she was a pushover. She told him that she was not planning on marrying that person. Dylan was certainly surprised and relieved upon hearing her. When he heard the news, a pleasant smile spread across his face. Ishil was surprised to see Sir Dylan smile, the smile that brought spring even in winter. She was hopeful after seeing him smile that he doesn't hate her. Ishil, gaining some courage, informed Dylan that someone would be getting married soon. But before she could finish her message, her friends screamed from behind, telling her that they were short on epes and would surely be disciplined. Ishil gasped hearing him and left Dylan, wishing him the best. Afterwards, she was busy counting the number of epes from the start and quickly forgot about the conversation with Dylan. In the end, she had to count it 5 more times, which made her shoulders ache. All she wanted to do was take some rest, but there were some other things she needed to check first. Upon reaching her house, She saw that there was a letter from the loan shop addressed to her and understood that her family had again borrowed money under her name. As she was about to enter, she overheard Pedro and her mother talking about her in the garden. Pedro told her how he broke up with Ishel and was thinking of trying to date her sister, but her mother told him to hold his thoughts since Ishel loved him so much and they were in a loyal relationship. She also planned to marry her younger daughter into a real noble family once they bought a noble title. Ishel couldn't believe the insensitive things they were speaking like it was perfectly normal. Pedro informed her mother that he would be receiving a noble title as a mage in a few months, asking her when her family would be restoring their title. The Laurel family were commoners at present, but originally they were from a fallen noble line. Before Ishel was born, their family's finances collapsed, and they had to sell off their title. Her mom told Pedro that she was going to borrow 300 million under Ishel's name from a loan shark and would be using that money to buy back a noble title. Since her oldest daughter was so mature, she was sure that Ishel would pay off the loan in no time. But she was also sure that even if she couldn't repay the debt, the late emperor's family unity policy would save them. The late emperor despised illegitimate children and single-person households, so he strongly promoted a normal family policy, which was made up of a mother, father, and children. That was the policy that bothered her the most in her past life because direct family members could easily use each other's names to take out loans, which was an absolutely ridiculous and evil law. Her mother proudly stated that she had Ishel's administrative ID and family registration document and was planning to go get a loan the day after. Pedro was happy they would be nobles, calling it a flawless plan, but Ishel was furious and was also scheming to give a befitting reply. She recorded the whole conversation between her mother and Pedro, and she knew that once she cut ties, they would understand how hard it was to borrow money. They would finally understand how miserable and pathetic it was to live. Going through life while being treated like a beggar by others, she was determined to make them experience it. She reached the downtown office and asked for the documents and notarization related to marriage. The clerk informed her that if she wanted to prevent her current family from using her name, the only legal option was adoption or marriage. Asking her to hurry, he also told her that if she got married in the future, she needed to make sure to sign the mutual agreement that was provided so that her husband couldn't also take out loans under her name. After the legal preparations were done, the only thing she was left with was to find a man to marry. But it wasn't an easy task. As she was sitting inside the Knights Order training grounds looking at the knights practicing, she knew that she wouldn't be able to just go and grab a random knight and ask them to marry her, but was also hopeful that she would find someone like her, who needed to marry urgently for a reason. The other girls sitting there were talking about Dylan because he kept looking their way. Ishel also noticed that Sir Dylan was there, and when she met his gaze, she recalled the conversation they had yesterday and remembered how he spoke to her with concern. She believed that if she married somebody like him, she would probably be happy. But she was sure that there was no way someone so perfect would marry her and decided to look for someone more realistic. Chapter 4. She decided to focus on finding a groom because it was the priority, and she had some requirements, which were that the groom must have an ordinary appearance and be someone who wouldn't be interested in her. She also wanted someone with good manners, but the most important priority was to find someone who would never ignore her due to his appearance. After writing all this down, she wondered if she would ever find a candidate by these standards. She had a few candidates in mind. The number one was Sir Tove. He had a warm personality and was the kindest among the knights. He was single and a celibate. She had also heard him talking about contract marriage and was in need of urgent money. Ishel thought that if everything went well, this marriage could be a win-win situation for them. The next candidate was Henry. Although he was not a knight since they worked together, he would certainly understand her situation. He was a good friend and ministry assistant. He was fun, and being together with him made her comfortable, but she was also bothered by office romances. She was sure that they could still be friends after the divorce. But they were the only two candidates she had in mind, and she was not sure if any of them would get married this quickly. She decided to try her luck and went to talk with Sir Tove. She asked him if he could come to the warehouse next to the training ground, telling him it was an important matter. When he agreed, she quickly left, asking him to follow her. As Ishel was nervously waiting in the warehouse, someone entered. She looked carefully and noticed that it wasn't Sir Tove but it was Dylan. She asked Dylan where Sir Tove was, and he regretfully informed her that he was dead. Ishil was shocked because he was alive just a moment ago, and Dylan told her that he was joking and regretfully informed her that he was not able to control his strength. He told Ishil that since Tove was not able to come, he would listen to her message and deliver it to him. Ishil thought that it would be strange to let a stranger deliver her plan, so she apologized because he came all the way here, telling Dylan that she would like to tell Tove the message directly. Suddenly, there was a gust of wind, and the paper somehow flew and fell in front of Sir Dylan, who got it. As he went through the paper, his eyes widened. Ishil was also losing her mind. After reading the proposal, he was shocked and speechless, but Ishil quickly snatched it and ran away, embarrassed. Later that night, she decided to head to the pub to drink and forget about her misfortune. Henry had also joined her and was surprised to see that Ishil was a heavy drinker. Ishil tried her best to coax Henry into marrying her, telling him about the hike in house prices and how the loan regulations were blocked. She told him that they did have a way to own a house and suggested that he marry her. That way they would get a new house to move in. She also promised him to never fall in love with him and would soon divorce him as the contract ended. Henry started laughing and told her that he was disappointed because she didn't realize what kind of person he was even after he expressed so much. He told her that it was his dream to get married to his lover and to go on sweet dates with his darling and propose to her romantically. But as he continued, Ishil, losing her patience, decided to go and meet Sir Tove at the barracks. She wondered if Tove had left work early and was sad because it was not easy to find a partner. Suddenly, someone came and called her, and when she turned around, she saw that it was Dylan. He told her that he had been waiting for her since he had something to ask, and he asked her why she was in a hurry to marry. She finally decided to tell him the truth and told him that it was not particularly Tor that she was planning to marry, as she would be okay with anybody if they were not disqualified. She hurriedly left because she didn't have much time on her hands but was again asked to wait. Dylan stopped her, grabbing her poncho and making her halt. He asked her if she was fine with marrying anybody, how about him as an option. Chapter 5. The next morning Ishil woke up with a hangover, and she thought that she had a really weird dream where Sir Dylan proposed. It was very vivid, but since it was unexpected, she believed it must have been a dream. She heard a knock, and a palace maid came and informed her that she had a visitor, and when she went out, she saw that it was Dylan standing in front of her with a bouquet. He told her that he came to formally propose to her. Dylan being a very particular person, at exactly 8:34 a.m. he left the night quarters for the Imperial Palace training grounds, and he reached the training grounds at 8:50 a.m. One of the other knights who was already there, upon seeing him, was shocked and wondered why he was there, but when he noticed the bouquet he was speechless. Upon meeting Ishil, he told her he had learned that gifting flowers was the rule of marriage. He knelt down in front of her and told her that yesterday he was too flustered to say it properly and wished to formally ask her if she wanted to marry him. Seeing him blush, Ishil felt she had seen it yesterday also. Suddenly, she remembered everything that happened last night when Dylan proposed for their marriage. He asked Ishil if he was not good enough to be a possible candidate. Ishil was sure that if she married him, she would be secure in her life. Although there were many rumors about him, he didn't seem like a bad person. She came to realize that she would be extremely grateful since she was in a rush. So she decided to accept it. When she asked Dylan if he was okay with marrying her, the situation suddenly turned awkward since he didn't reply. Ishil thought Dylan was actually joking, and she overreacted. She was embarrassed and regretted her decision to even ask him. Ishil apologized and told him that she would figure something out with Henry, asking him to take it as a joke, but Dylan replied that he wasn't joking and agreed to marry her. Upon receiving the confirmation, Ishil wanted to celebrate it quickly. She had even brought some liquor with her, thinking that if she succeeded, she would have one drink to celebrate. Dylan was too nervous since that alcohol was very strong, and seeing her gulp it down in one go made him worry. But Ishil was glad because she found a groom and finally would be able to escape her frustrated life. Right after she drank the liquor, she got drunk and decided to register for their marriage. Dylan also thought that it was a good idea since the government office was working overtime and they could register immediately. That night after drinking, They headed straight for the city hall and finished registering the marriage. Suddenly, everything came back to her, and she was dumbfounded, not being able to speak. Dylan, seeing her silence, thought that she might have decided against the marriage and asked her if she was regretting her decision. Ishil thought about it for a second. She had no idea why Dylan even wanted to marry her, and it was almost scary to ask him the reason, but she also knew that if she didn't marry, her life would just be consumed by others. She didn't know why, but she had a feeling that this contract marriage would be happy. So she happily accepted the bouquet and decided to get married. Chapter 6. She invited him inside and told him that she was planning to create a contract, and Dylan was happy to sign it. She gave him the contract and told him that the contract details had been notarized by a lawyer and he just needed to sign it. It was about guaranteeing each other's privacy, but she also included necessary clauses for daily life, which were simple things. She didn't think it would affect Dylan in his daily life, but upon seeing a clause, he asked her why there was a clause called divorce. Ishil replied that since their personalities might not match as well and various things could happen, they would get divorced after 1 year, leaving him in dismay. Ishil, upon seeing his reaction, thought that Dylan was not happy with the basic contract period of 1 year and that the contract period was too long, but that was not the issue. When Ishil told him that, depending on their situation, they could also consider an extension of the marriage. His face suddenly brightened, and he was hopeful. He asked Ishil if the townhouse was available for them to immediately move in. Ishil replied that it was asking him if he was planning to move in right away. Dylan told her that he would go see his older brother and do it right away and was excited to prepare dinner for them, telling her not to bring anything. He was determined to win her heart in that time no matter what. In the imperial palace, the emperor was having lunch with his master, who was supposed to leave for a trip very soon. The Duke of Savoy, the emperor's master, replied that this time he had to go to the west. He held the title of the Master of the Magic Tower in the vast land and also held the position of the emperor's teacher, who, due to an incident from a few years ago, had left him unexpressive. It was known as the Million Theater Terror. The terrorist group known as Red Star tried to overthrow the empire through their attacks. The master's son and daughter-in-law both lost their lives, and they even lost their 5-year-old granddaughter. After which, every emotion disappeared from his master's face. The emperor told him that on the day of the attack, he tracked down the theater employee who survived and was hiding in a tea house in the west, so he was hopeful that his master would be able to find his missing granddaughter, Princess Diana. The Duke thanked him for his help and asked him about the atmosphere in the Grand Duke's castle, and he replied that it was the same as always. 300 years ago there was a witch who lived in an ice castle and reigned as a proud sorceress. She encountered the emperor and fell into a passionate, unrequited love. However, the emperor feared and loathed the witch, who was hurt by his response and cast a powerful curse on the emperor, making him unable to feel any emotion. The curse reached Duke Kasha, who is of the emperor's bloodline. The territory became an ice castle trapped in an endless winter, and since then they have had to live with all their emotions frozen in ice. So, the Dukes of Kasha live their entire lives in solitude in the cursed castle, eventually going mad and dying on the battlefield. However, one person, who was also cursed but, unlike the others, managed to live. And speaking of the devil, his beloved younger sibling, the Duke of Kasha, greeted the emperor. Chapter 7. Dylan was the current Duke of Kasha. Upon entering the dining room, he greeted the emperor, but the emperor noticed that his expressions were a bit strange. He asked the maid serving them to excuse herself as he had something important to discuss. The emperor invited him to sit and enjoy a meal together. He thought that Dylan must have found a clue about the terrorists trying to assassinate the royal family, but instead, Dylan informed them that he got married, surprising the emperor. The Duke, as usual, congratulated him without much expression. Shocked, he couldn't believe that Dylan got married so suddenly. He wanted to know about the woman, asking him if he knew her well enough. Dylan replied that they had known each other for a while and he registered the marriage as a commoner, but he was also planning to reveal his real identity very soon. Hearing that, the emperor believed that he was thinking about this marriage seriously. He wanted to know what the woman he was planning to marry did for a living and came to know that she worked in the same knighthood as him. He explained that she was a bit short with a barely visible mole right under her eyes hidden behind her glasses. The emperor really got curious and wondered why his brother was acting like this all of a sudden, but also questioned why he was so bothered about it. The emperor told Dylan to always remember that sometimes people have moments when they act out of character. He was really worried about his brother and didn't pay any attention to what he was saying afterwards. All he wondered was what kind of woman she could be to force Dylan to make such expressions. He had never seen him smile like that before, and Dylan had always been a serious child. The former emperor despised him, calling him a blemish on a perfect life that everyone envied, and kept him confined for life in a small house outside the palace cursed with dark magic. By the time he had lived in prison for well over 10 years, he was sent to war, hoping that he would die. That was how Dylan grew into a cold, stoic young man befitting the curse of the Duke of Kasha. He was a perfectionist who constantly had to prove his worth to survive, and perhaps this marriage was the only exception in his life. Now the emperor was really curious about the woman who made him like that. He asked him if he married her because of love, but Dylan stated that there was a different reason. It wasn't love, but just an ordinary feeling, something like admiration. The emperor, beyond words, couldn't understand how someone could just admire their wife. Dylan didn't have any answer for it. The emperor realized that he spoke about his brother's romance like a nosy old woman, but there was something he was concerned about. Within the palace knighthood, there existed terrorist forces trying to overthrow the empire, and in the worst case, the woman Dylan fell in love with could also be a terrorist. She could have easily used a love potion with dark magic on his brother. And as his brother, the emperor wanted to check her out for himself because he was curious about the woman who made his stoic brother smile. He began laughing weirdly, thinking about something just to curb his curiosity. He informed his royal aide that he had an urgent confidential matter, which was to check if his brother's wife was a terrorist or not. Later that day, her mother came to meet with her in a cafe. She was happy because this place was quite nice and was wondering if it was because it was near the palace and the air felt fresh. Ishil asked why she wanted to meet, and her mother, trying to manipulate her, called her her baby and told her to give her some money because she wanted to buy a dress. In the past, she was bribed by the phrases, "my baby" and "my daughter," and gave her everything. But this time she was different. She told her that she would be a little late because her payday was delayed, but she was willing to give her the dress and asked her mother to sign a form. She took the documents and went through them but couldn't understand what was written since it was written in an ancient language. Chapter 8. There were two official languages that were used throughout the empire. One was the imperial common language, and the other was the ancient imperial tongue. Nobles like her mother typically learned the ancient tongue from a young age. Lady Martha, who lived her whole life as a fallen noble for over a decade, was never very bright to begin with and forgot what little she once knew. Since she was good with academics, she picked it up easily while studying. She told her mom that it was a consent letter for a loan contract. Her mom asked why a loan company was bothering her, and she replied that it was because she wanted to take out a loan. The address was a pretty loan form with over 1,000% interest rates, and even knowing that, her mother blindly signed because of her own greed. This was the last chance she was willing to offer. And it was just a test because what she signed wasn't a loan document but the evidence of all the exploitation she had been subjected to, blackmailing. They had met one requirement for filing the company compensation notice. The clerk had told her when giving the form that to deliver this notice, she must need the recipient's consent. What a stupid law. Ishale was out of her mind thinking who in their right mind would agree to a compensation claim. Although it was ridiculous, that was the law, which was why compensation claims rarely worked out in practice, but she somehow got her mom to sign it. And after thanking her, she headed back to work. Her mother, before she left, asked when the new dress would be arriving, and she happily replied that it would be arriving within 2 days and thanked her for personally signing off on their doom. Back at her work, Henry and Marilyn were pestering her regarding her marriage, pestering her about Sir Dylan, and upon seeing everybody's reaction, she decided to keep the marriage a secret for now. But before she could escape, Marilyn, who also had a crush on Sir Dylan, stopped her. She told her that although she doesn't know what she did to Sir Dylan, she was a misfit duckling. In her mind, she definitely was a misfit, the queen, but hearing it from someone else pissed her off. So to quickly distract Marilyn, she simply stated that she had something stuck in her front teeth. Marilyn became preoccupied because she had some olives for lunch and thought that her teeth may actually look bad. Since Marilyn always teased her by calling her Bang Bang because she had beautiful bangs, she decided to chop off the broom head of hers over the weekend for Sir Dylan's sake. But when she was back to work approving documents, she noticed Sir Tove applying for protective gear and wondered if someone was threatening his life. Marilyn, after fixing her teeth, came back to pester her again because she was intent on talking. She kept asking her questions about Dylan and told her that he already had a lady he loved. Someone who was more graceful and more beautiful, unlike her, asked her to back off. But Ishil, not wanting to deal with her, simply plugged her ears. It didn't matter to her because they were simply in a contract marriage. In the newlyweds' townhouse, Dylan was busy preparing their dinner. He was going full force, even wearing a cute uniform apron. Today was the first day he had ever used vacation leave, and the look on the administrator's face when he applied was pure shock. He couldn't believe that the same person who gave up every holiday and basically lived at the night quarters was asking for a leave and thought that the world must be ending. Some of the other knights even thought that Dylan was terminally ill, but one of them even suggested that he was getting married, which caught his attention. As he began to wonder how they guessed, the knight quickly apologized for prying into his private life and approved his request. He was busy preparing dinner, thinking about how he had spent his entire childhood trapped in a cursed little house, and what he was most curious about in this world was the thing called family. To him, his only family was his father, who never showed him love, calling him a disgrace to his life. The only reason he was not killed was that his father didn't want his filthy blood on his hands, and he was made to live out his pathetic life in the north like a dog chained in shame. The little boy didn't understand what he did wrong and always dreamed of serving a noble lady of his own one day. So he decided to do as he had practiced all this time, and he would be done. The dinner was almost complete by 5:30, and he decided to decorate the table with neat plates and the food. When Ishil entered their home, she smelled something delicious. She saw Dylan waiting for her. She decided to trust him, even though it was just a one-year marriage.
That's all for today. See you in the next episode, friends. Until then, keep reading manga.